Our next guest went to Youth Outlook in 1998. She was hired as the agency's first executive director. When Nancy Mullen arrived, Youth Outlook, then known as QYC, had 2 drop-in centers, running one in Hinsdale and one in Aurora. She has helped the agency grow just a bit since 1998. There are now 8 drop-in centers in 4 counties, a youth leadership program, a healthy relationships program, a peer-led HIV prevention program, and a thriving community education program. Nancy, would you first tell us a little bit about Youth Outlook, so those of you who don't know about it can be educated about it, and then tell us about what I received in the mail today about your book.
Absolutely.
I got it in the mail today, and I said, "Oh, Nancy's book." And I had a little time just to go read about 4 or 5 pages, and I really did not want to put it down, but I knew I had to prepare for tonight's event. So, Nancy, welcome to Outward's Journey, and you're on.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you to all of the Tonys that are sitting in with us this evening. On the topic of Youth Outlook, we've had an update even since material went to Tony. We're in a total of 6 counties now, running drop-in centers Monday through Thursday evening. We have survived the COVID shutdown by taking all of our services online, and we've been meeting with the youth groups via Zoom, just like this. Looks very much like this. With hope that sometime this spring we'll be able to return to in-person services and do some starting outdoors, socially distanced, masks required kinds of activities. Some of our host churches won't open themselves until later in the year. We may beat them to the punchline to get services up and running in person before the church is open to the public. So we are just trying to hang on to get us through this wild time for an agency that never set out to have virtual services. I think we've survived this year online pretty well. And we've got a core group of kids who are using the virtual services, and a core group of other kids who are telling us we really only want to come in person. We don't have the privacy. We don't have our own device. We're sharing a laptop or a Chromebook with a sibling. Or, you know, I'm sitting in the kitchen and mom and dad are walking past me, and it's just really awkward to have all my friends sitting up there on the screen. So we know we've got these 2 different sets of folks that we're trying to meet the needs of. So we've been trying to be as creative as possible and as flexible as possible to try to hang in there with the kids and get them through this. Now that we're starting this new year, I expect we'll do our 2nd Lavender graduation this year, which was just a lot of fun for the kids that were graduating 8th grade, high school, and associate's degree last year. When all of the high schools and everything else had closed and nobody was doing graduation services, we did our first Lavender graduation for our graduates, and had a keynote speaker from among our youth leaders and board members there. And we made little diplomas and emailed them to the kids and ran a PowerPoint with their diplomas on it. So we're really looking forward to being able to celebrate some new stuff with them again this year. It'll be fun.
Before you move on to the book, for those who don't, for those who don't know, who is it specifically that Youth Outlook has mission to?
Oh, thank you, Tony. I blanked on that piece completely. We serve LGBT youth from the ages of 12 to 20. And last fall, we relaunched our young adult group. So we're now serving that 18 to 24 range as well in a separate group at a different time of day, away from the evening drop-in center, so they have their own space. And we've got a parent group that is also running on Zoom, combining Naperville and Palatine We can serve parents who are coming from any of our service locations. Just so happens that the person who is the facilitator is based out of the Palatine group right now. Did that cover it?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
You want me to move on?
Please do.
Okay. So the other thing that Tony mentioned is right before Christmas, about 10 days before Christmas, I released my first book. This has been a wild, exciting ride this year. I went into 2020 swearing to myself, all right, this book has sat on the shelf for 7 years, literally 7 years. I finished writing in 2013. It's time to do something with this. So I got this full head of steam, and we ran face first into COVID, and everything shut down. And I went, oh, we're not going to do it this year. And the more I poked at the idea, the more I realized I was really just drawn to the self-publishing idea. I got really impatient waiting to find a publisher. I got really impatient waiting to find an agent. And I was like, just let's do this. Let's move forward on this. It's been long enough. So I worked through the summer to raise the money on Kickstarter to do our first round of printing. And they were sent to me in early December, and the FedEx man was so excited and kept delivering box after box to my front steps. And at first he was a little frustrated. He's like, what the hell did you order that you need 14 of? my first book was just published, and that got elbow bumps, and then he wanted to do selfies by his truck, and it just became this whole really positive thing. So the book has been released into the wild. The first round of people who supported the fundraiser and have been part of kind of the support network that I've called upon have gotten their copies, and it's now available in Anderson's and Prairie Fox in Ottawa, and Books on First and Dixon, and Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. So that's been really exciting. What I'm going to do for you tonight is a kind of a performance of a segment of a chapter. Shall I jump in, Tony?
Go right ahead.
All right. My sister-in-law, Jetta, enrolled me in the 7th grade at the middle school, and Elvis died. I was fairly certain those two events were not related. I'd never been to a public school, and I got to tell you, with my first experience, I wondered if Elvis might have had the right idea. Even the year I'd lived with my sister, Pat, I'd gone to a Catholic school, so I was nervous. I didn't make friends easily, knowing after 5 years of my brother Michael's rants about me that I was the dumbest, ugliest, and certainly the fattest human being on the face of the planet.
I think you're back.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. So my Aunt Connie was forever thumping me between the shoulder blades and telling me to stand up straight. I was much more comfortable kind of curling in on myself, trying to disappear. I didn't expect to make friends at this school, but I didn't expect what I got either. Coming out of a highly structured Catholic school system where we wore the same uniform every day, where our every move was monitored, where we were conditioned from the first day of first grade, when to sit, when to stand, when to speak, and what to say, the chaos of the middle school put me on red alert right away. Sandwiched between this group of 6th graders and the really moody and unsupervised 8th graders, I went unnoticed for the first couple of weeks, the transfer kid. But during the 3rd week, an unmistakable and unforgivable bullseye was sketched on my back, and all expectations of civility ended. It started in the cafeteria. I sat with 2 new friends I had met in my PE class. I hated everything about this lunch at this new school, and usually just sat listening to the conversations around me rather than trying to shout to be heard above the noise to people I hardly knew. I had just finished my sandwich, and I was creasing and recreasing the brown paper bag for lack of something more entertaining to do, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I glanced up. Behind me stood a girl I recognized from another class. Beyond her, directly in my line of vision, was the table she had come from. She started to speak. Our surroundings were so loud that I didn't catch the beginning of what she said, but it ended with, "wants to meet you." and she gestured at the table behind her. I followed her gesture until I was looking at that table full of girls with whom she'd just been sitting. They were the popular girls, the girls with the perfect clothes and the perfect haircuts. I personally hadn't had a decent haircut since the father started taking me to his barber, whose cuts looked like he slapped a jello mold over my head and snipped around the edges with blunt-nosed scissors. Most days I wanted to shave my own head and just be done with it. Who at that table would ever want to speak to me? Before I could ask what she was talking about, the entire table burst out laughing, and one of the girls who was sitting there, who was also in my PE class, exclaimed, "I told you she would look." Confused, I turned back to the girl who had tapped my shoulder. This seemed to require some kind of response, but not being sure what she had said to me, I didn't know what to say in return. I had the sudden troubling sensation I had just become a punchline. She saved me the effort of trying to figure out what to ask. She gave me a look of utter disgust and said, "Leslie." Then she huffed back to her table, where the other girls pounded on her back and screamed their laughter in my direction. Still not understanding, I turned to the new friend from my PE class. "Nat, what was that?" Nat set an empty milk carton on the table in front of her and smacked it flat. "She said there was a girl at their table that wanted to meet you. They were waiting for you to turn around." "Well, she called me." I had a vague sense of what I had just been called, but I had no idea what I had done to bring its vileness down on my own head. That was a word that was not spoken in my neighborhood. It was a word used in weapon-like whispers, and it meant something awful. "Yeah, don't worry about it. They're all like that." Nat dismissed the whole group of them, and I fell silent. The table behind us, though, was anything but silent. The comments in the hall started by the end of that day. "Dyke, Leslie, faggot." I had been in this school less than 3 weeks. I'd done nothing wrong that I could think of. I hadn't crossed any social boundaries that I could identify. When they approached me, I hadn't been looking at them. I hadn't expected anyone to speak to me. I just wanted to sit quietly and fade into the background. I wasn't that, whatever that meant. I was not whatever those whispers meant. I was nothing. But my lack of identity didn't stop the comments, and I had no idea how to make the girls who had started this understand that I was just nothing. Besides, it was too late now. This was already way beyond the popular girls. When the boys joined in and the physical harassment started, my lack of an identity, or my refusal to own up to what a worthless pervert I was. Could I be a worthless pervert if I wasn't aware of it? Wouldn't I know that somehow? Didn't stop that either. The halls were mostly unsupervised, and anonymous hands frequently reached out of the passing throngs of people and whacked me in the head or shoved me up against my locker, usually with an accompanying snarled, "Dyke." The whispers and the snickers were incessant. When I attempted to confront them one morning, slamming my locker door closed and wheeling around to face this group of girls that was giggling at me from several yards away, my adamant, "No, I am not," was met with a bland, "For your information, we've heard that you are," as if other people were certainly more expert on my orientation than I knew of it, and I was an idiot for suggesting otherwise. The weather turned. My jacket had a hood on it. It was the perfect tool for the kids in seats behind me to grab hold of and drag downward with this ominous muttered, "Like that, Leslie," as the jacket slipped up around my neck and strangled me. Released, I looked around to see who had grabbed me, but several of them were laughing, so I could never pick out the one instigator. While I might have gone up against one of them when we got off the bus if I was faced with no other options, I wasn't about to try taking on 6 or 7 boys at a time. I dreaded getting off the bus. I dreaded going to school. By mid-October, sitting on the bus with knots in my stomach yet again, I realized I could have stayed in the father's house and put up with this garbage. It should go without saying, that PE class was horrible. The other students split into camps. The popular girls led the verbal assault, and the girls I had managed to befriend because they weren't in the popular crowd stood by as silent witnesses with the rest of the class. The class itself wasn't problematic, despite the fact that I am not terribly athletic. I am way more comfortable with a book in my hand than I am on the uneven parallel bars. The locker room, though, that was another story altogether. That PE class required showering as part of everyone's grade. My school at home didn't even have a PE class, and here I was expected to undress in the middle of a group of hostile strangers bent on humiliating me at every opportunity. I went through every possible contortion to become invisible, waiting till the last minute, wrapping up in my giant towel, only showering in one of the 2 stalls with curtains that the locker room had. The PE teacher sat at the end of the shower room with a clipboard in her hand, making check marks next to people's names as they went by on their way out. Post-shower, there was no way around the abasement. Standing by my locker, wrestling my way back into my clothes without bothering to dry off, I glanced up at the wall clock to see what time hell ended. As I did, one of the popular girls who had been at that cafeteria table when the bullseye was drawn on my back, I told you she would look, walked by on her way to get redressed. She paused, staring at me. I looked away and fidgeted, really uneasy. She just stood there. I checked to see if she was still staring. When I did, she opened her towel and announced loudly, "Get a good look, why don't you?" The teacher said nothing. She stood up, clipboard in hand, and retreated to her office. My ears burned, and I averted my eyes immediately, grabbing the locker door and positioning it between her and me. What the hell was it with this girl and what she thought I should or shouldn't be looking at? I didn't want to see her. I was not that. The girls around me howled with laughter, and a bra flew over the lockers to fall in front of me. I skittered away from it. What exactly was wrong with these people? Couldn't they see that I was just nothing? Thank you.